Welcome to Life by Design, episode 329. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Crayshow Jug.
Feels like it's been a while.
It does feel like it's been a while. That's what happens in the summer on holidays and difficult to coordinate schedules. So we've had a few solo episodes, but Crayshow, great to have you on the show.
All right. Happy to be here, as always.
All right. We are creators of Life by Design with 25 plus certified locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today, we're talking about what probably seemed like a controversial topic on the surface, and I think it might be a lot less controversial than you think, and you might be surprised, which often happens when we do these podcasts and have these conversations. But we're challenging this idea, at least enough to start the conversation, is eating a plant-based diet, especially just because it's super popular or increasing in popularity, does that mean that it's healthy? And it's not just obviously a plant-based diet. My point and your point in today's episode is, whether it's paleo, plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, keto, natural, organic, drugless, there's, a lot of catch terms when it comes to health that I think oftentimes just get lumped in, or as we've talked about here in the show, there's a health halo effect, and people, the average layperson market, just assumes it must be healthy. And I think plant-based diet, as well as lots of other things, are situations that fall into that category. Crayshow.
Totally agree. I can't add it or put it any better than that. It first caught my attention. I mean, for a long time, I'm always paying attention to trends in health and what companies are producing and manufacturing. And I think that's just an interesting point. I like that companies do this stuff. I think it's great. I love that there's, I love freedom and I love options. And I love that, the fast food companies are realizing that this is a popular item and they want to attract more customers and make their customers happy. So they're doing it. So that's definitely not part of the conversation. But there's, the inherent assumption. And it's obviously it's being supported by big organizations like the government now of Canada. They released, and we did an episode on the Canadian Food Guide, where the diet is switching more. And I feel like I need to make air quotations every time I say this word, but more to a plant-based diet. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's the association that this is healthier. And of course, this is not necessarily the case because alcohol is plant-based. It's not healthy. Drugs like cocaine and marijuana and those things are potentially not healthy. So just because something is plant-based does not mean that it's healthy.
Well, if you go back in time, you've just seen this over and over again. I mean, I think back to my time, the more recently omega-3 fats, right, being fortified and added into eggs as an example.
Yep.
The increase in nut milk. So first it was soy milk, and then it trended into things like, almond milk and coconut. I mean, these were things that, 15 years ago, you had to get like a milk sock and you're grinding up, nuts and running water through them and creating your own milks. And now, the market has started to add those to it. And I'm sure if you look 60 years ago and 70 years ago, when we started to go into this low fat trend, same idea, you would start to, see a change in what was available in the marketplace to accommodate what people thought. And we know that a lot of those things aren't healthy. And so the same thing comes to light today is, just because something is plant-based or even paleo or drugless some of these things I do believe are healthy, but they're healthy for the reason that they're healthy. They're not necessarily healthy for the reason that they have a name that's popular.
Yeah. Of course, when you talk about healthy, it's a sliding scale, right? Like it's the idea of some things could be healthier, like I would tend to, argue that something like drugless tend to be more on the side of health, whereas something that has drugs in it tend to being more to creating a certain effect, for example. Mm-hmm. Right. And again, we can find specific examples and argue about them, but it's not as, in this case, there are things that are very black and white, but this is not one of those cases.
Yeah, I think the point of the episode today is to start the conversation to continue the conversation, I should say, of people thinking in principle, right? Because this is really, as you said in your show notes, it's the most crucial step to people being able to make their own health decisions, is to think for themselves and to think in general. and to start to apply that type of thinking to what they eat, or, what they do for exercise, or how they live their lifestyles. So, people tend to fall into this category of, well, the government said it's good, so it must be good. Or now I'm seeing at all these fast food places, it must be good. And of course, people, I think, inherently want to be healthy. Now, some of it might be internally driven. Some of it might be the fact that they think they should want to be healthy. And so they'll go to a fast food restaurant and they might make that choice or that option simply because it's available and they're being marketed to that that's a healthy choice. Our case and contention is that it really requires you to think through this. So if I go to a fast food restaurant, given that I feel like I've put in the time and energy and I know what's healthy, I'm not looking for, meatless Tuesdays or Mondays or whatever it is. I'm not looking for the salad without the meat. I'm actually looking for the opposite. I'm going to get a burger without a bun, maybe a salad without the croutons. I have a different decision that is going to be made, but it's not based on what's being marketed to me as much as it's based on, the time that we've taken to understand what we should be consuming from a nutrient perspective.
Oh, okay. So, to be clear, if I'm going to be healthy, I'm not going to go to a fast food restaurant, no matter what. Anything that they serve. If I'm going to a fast food restaurant, I'm going there because it's an off-track meal, and I want to get something that I feel like eating on that day.
Are you asking me, or that's what you're saying you do?
No, I'm saying that's what I would do, right? So
see, whereas I don't mind going to a fast food restaurant to eat. I'll just choose things that fall within my meal choices that are going to meet my macronutrient decisions.
Yeah, well, I think this is exactly the point of the episode, right? Whereas if I'm going to go, I know that I would rather just not eat. If the goal is to stay on track, we have a meeting and someone says, hey, let's just meet for McDonald's. I feel like grabbing breakfast there. If it's not an off track day, I'm not getting anything. Like, I'm probably just going to get a coffee and that'll be my meeting, for example.
Yeah. Side note, McDonald's coffee is not half bad.
I would actually go a little bit further on that one. I would say McDonald's coffee is good.
Yeah, I agree. If I had to pick something other than Charlie's, and I still probably would pick Starbucks over McDonald's, but I'll tell you, sure. Some days though, I don't know what goes on at some Starbucks, but some days I would definitely pick McDonald's over Starbucks.
Yeah, sometimes I asked. So our team leader Adrienne used to work at Starbucks before she started working at our place, and I asked her, and she said sometimes when they get really busy, they don't perform like the proper cleaning on the espresso machine sometimes. Gotcha. And then sometimes that can make the shots really bitter.
Okay.
So yeah. So okay, let's go. Now that I'm thinking about coffee, I'm gonna have to make a coffee after the episode's done.
Yeah.
But most importantly, right? Like the reason. The whole point of this episode is to get people to understand that just because something is marketed or called a certain thing, it doesn't mean that it's healthy. So let's go back and just review the essentials of like what we would consider healthy and why we would consider it healthy. And it's based on what your body actually physiologically needs to run. So when we're talking about diet, particularly, you need your macronutrients, which are protein, fat, and carbohydrates, and you need your micronutrients, which are minerals and vitamins. That's what your body requires. And now the best way to get those things is in sources that you have adapted to evolutionarily over time that are the safest for you to digest with the least amount of toxicity.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And I think you could even make the case if we talk about, essential macronutrients, carbohydrate doesn't necessarily even have to fall into that. Not suggesting that you don't eat carbohydrates, but from a pure,
you're
really
right.
Make it simple. Agree. Like what is essential to our body, and protein and fat are essential to our body. Carbohydrate not necessarily essential, and this is where I don't know if we could say coin the term. I haven't heard anybody else really say it other than us. But I can't say that that's not the case. But, carbohydrate appropriateness, so I'm not saying you wouldn't thrive on a certain number of carbohydrates given a few different factors. So, but from an essential standpoint, fat and protein are your kind of starting points, micronutrients. And this is the nice thing about choosing food sources that are, whole food sources that are maximizing nutrient density. So let's say, for example, I'm definitely an advocate of healthy animal products. I feel like healthy animal products are nutrient dense. When you talk about micronutrients, they've got an extremely high amount of bioavailable micronutrients that are difficult to get in other sources and other ways. And, really, if you stuck me somewhere in a desert island and gave me one thing to eat and you said, the goal here is to be healthy, aka also healthy and happy, but I'm probably going to go with grass-fed beef. And that's my number one food source and food choice if I could only pick one thing to eat for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, right, we're talking about health. So if veganism or vegetarianism or a plant-based diet and you're choosing to avoid animal products, one of the things that you should be doing is you should be supplementing with all of the minerals, vitamins, B12, cobalamin, coenzyme Q10, all the things that would be readily available in meat that you aren't getting into your body, right? So the requirements of your body haven't changed, but the way that you're going to go about fulfilling those requirements do change because you're a human and you get to choose things for yourself.
Well, to go one step further here, we're talking about human and the human being. It always interested me, this idea of, the one species, one diet concept. And, a lot of people will talk about things like, well, apes, are vegetarians and look at how big they are. And of course they're apes. And so that's what apes eat.
They're not humans. Right?
They're not humans. And I think that's, an important part. And, I've heard the argument, like there's not such thing as like a vegetarian lion. There's not such thing as, like a meat eating ape.
Those are lions though.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So that's the whole point. It's like genetically we are humans. And as much as there are variations, there's, phenotypes and modifications and different genetic expressions and so on, the requirements don't change. And so we're not saying the source of food doesn't change based on where you live, what you have exposure to, and even adapting to those. So whether it's the combination of, fat, carbohydrate, proteins, and how those percentages look based on what's available to you. But again, thinking in principle, the requirements don't change.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. Even that argument on genes. So let's be clear on like what a gene does here, right? Because people will say, well, we have whatever, like 40, however many chromosomes, and we're literally one chromosome away from a gorilla. Yeah, but what the context that gets dropped here is the purpose of chromosomes are to create proteins. And those chromosomes are responsible for creating billions and billions of proteins. So one chromosomal change literally results in a completely different protein profile and a completely different organism.
Well, that exactly. We're also, what is it, like, 2% away from being a tomato. So it's like,
but that's exactly the point. So you can't drop the context of like what these things create. So like all these arguments, they're just silly. You're a human, which means that you're different from a tomato, and you're different from a silverback gorilla, and you're different from a lion. So comparing ourselves to these things, other than like to study is great. There's definitely things we can learn, but it doesn't always apply in every case.
Yeah. And I think the take home here, to wrap it up in that sense, is, the principle is that there are requirements outside of just nutrition. There's requirements that are part of being a human or any organism. And so the goal really, from a health perspective, is to optimize the sufficiency of those requirements, right? Making sure that those requirements are met and allowing the, internal processes of the body to essentially run the body the way that the body was built to run. And it's really that simple. Now, you take it down to a day-to-day action. It's, well, what do I eat? What do I choose? And, to simplify it for everybody, it's simple. You just eat real food. It's probably the best place to start.
Well, that's really the thing, right? Nobody markets that like that, right? It's not it's marketed around buzzwords, plant-based, paleo, keto, which are popular terms that people associate with health and freshness and good, but it doesn't necessarily compute. Whereas if something is made from real food, right, the tendency of it to come from products that your body knows how to work with and how to digest and use properly, there's much higher.
Yeah, I think you'd be hard pressed to eat a diet that was 100% real food and not have, a significant improvement in your health. And so I think that's the goal for people to start with is, don't worry so much about the food quantity, just focus in on the food quality, eating real food, eating more of it, filling yourself up on real food, not even necessarily worrying about the amount of real food that you're eating, at least in the beginning, and just get your body used to having tons of nutrients available for it to work and do its job and heal and repair and essentially be a healthy human being. don't worry so much about the buzzword of the day. Focus more on filling your body full of food that's real, that's going to make you healthy. So, guys, go to the show notes. You can see anything we talked about today there at lifebydesign.com/podcast. Check out today's episode. And as always, thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.